A long table covered in a white tablecloth stretched across a backyard in Boyle Heights, East LA, 1978. Doña Carmen had been cooking for 3 days. 200 guests were coming for her granddaughter's quinceañera, and every dish came from memory. No cookbook, just hands that had been doing this since Zacatecas. That spread is gone now. Most of their granddaughters have never tasted what a real fiesta table used to hold. Number 7 on this list took 3 days to prepare. Number 11 required digging a pit and burying the meat overnight. Number 17 was a mole so old it predates the Spanish by centuries. These were the dishes that made a celebration sacred. If you grew up in a Mexican household before 1985, you remember that table. Hit that subscribe button. Here are 25 forgotten Mexican fiesta dishes that disappeared after the 1980s. Number 25, Asado de boda. In Zacatecas, a wedding without this dish was not a wedding. It was just a party. Pork shoulders simmered for hours in a sauce of chile ancho, guajillo, roasted tomatoes, garlic, cumin, cinnamon, cloves, and Mexican chocolate. The sauce turned the color of dried blood, thick, rich, almost black at the edges of the pot. The groom's family was expected to provide this for the bride's side, not optional. The women started cooking 2 days before the ceremony in outdoor kitchens built from cinder blocks. 50 pounds of pork, 20 pounds of dried chiles. Your whole neighborhood could smell it. Your abuela served it over white rice with handmade tortillas stacked a foot high. By the 1990s, caterers replaced those backyard kitchens. The tradition of the groom's family cooking for the bride's family faded with it. Number 24. Barbacoa de hoyo. This was not the barbacoa you buy at a taqueria on Sunday morning. This was the real thing. A hole dug 3 feet deep in your backyard. Mesquite coals burned to white ash at the bottom. A whole cowhead or lamb wrapped in maguey leaves lowered into the pit on a metal grate. Covered with wet burlap, covered with dirt, left overnight for 14 hours. The men stayed up drinking and tending the fire. By dawn, the meat was so tender it fell apart when you touched it. Families in South Texas and northern Mexico did this for baptisms, communions, and quinceañeras through the 1970s. The maguey leaves gave the meat a smoky sweetness no oven could replicate. City ordinances killed it. Suburban backyards were too small. By 1985, most families bought their barbacoa from a carniceria instead. The pit disappeared. The flavor went with it. Number 23, mole de guajolote. Turkey mole, not chicken, turkey. A wild guajolote from the rancho, butchered the morning of the feast. The mole itself was a 2-day project. 30 ingredients or more. Dried chiles mulatto, ancho, pasilla, chipotle, roasted peanuts, almonds, sesame seeds. Stale tortillas fried in lard. Tomatoes, tomatillos, garlic, onion. Every ingredient toasted or charred separately before grinding. Your abuela's arms ached from the work. The paste went into a clay pot with turkey broth and simmered until it thickened into something that tasted like the earth itself had been cooked down. This was the dish reserved for Dia de los Muertos altars, for the dead who deserved the best. By the 1980s, families in the United States started buying mole paste in jars. The 2-day ritual became a 30-minute shortcut. The guajolote was replaced by a supermarket chicken. That mattered. Number 22, Revoltijo de romeritos. This was a Lenten dish, but it appeared at every Nochebuena table in central Mexico through the 1970s. Romeritos, a wild herb that tasted nothing like rosemary. Nopales cut into strips. Dried shrimp cakes fried golden. All of it simmered in a red mole of ancho and guajillo chilies. The combination sounds strange if you did not grow up with it. But at Christmas Eve dinner in Mexico City, this was the dish that meant your family was still doing things the traditional way. The romeritos had to be cleaned by hand, 1 sprig at a time, which took hours. The shrimp cakes had to be formed, dipped in egg, and fried individually. Grandmothers did this without complaint. Their daughters did not. By the 1990s, Revoltijo disappeared from most Christmas tables north of the border. The herbs were hard to find. The labor was too much. The tradition quietly ended. Number 21. Cabrito al pastor. In Monterrey and across Nuevo León, no baptism was complete without a whole baby goat roasted over open fire. The animal was butterflied, skewered on a metal rod, and propped beside a mesquite fire for 5 hours. The skin turned golden and crispy. The meat underneath stayed tender and mild. Cabrito al pastor was the ultimate celebration food in northern Mexico. Your family ordered the goat days in advance from a ranch. The men tended the fire. The women prepared the sides: beans, rice, fresh tortillas, salsa roja. A whole cabrito fed 40 people for about $15 in 1975. By the late 1980s, the backyard roasting gave way to restaurant cabrito. The taste was close, but the ceremony was gone. The fire, the men around it, the hours of waiting. That was the real dish. Number 20. Champurrado de masa. Not the instant champurrado from a packet. The real one, made with fresh masa from the tortilleria, dissolved into water, stirred into piloncillo syrup with cinnamon, vanilla, and Mexican chocolate, thick enough to stand a spoon in. At posadas in the 1960s and 1970s, every house on the block made a pot for the procession. Someone handed you a clay mug of this dense, warm chocolate corn drink at each stop. Children drank it. Grandparents drank it. It was the taste of December. The fresh masa made all the difference. It gave the champurrado an earthy sweetness that the powdered version could never touch. When tortillerias started closing in Mexican-American neighborhoods in the 1980s, fresh masa became hard to find. The champurrado went from handmade to instant. The posada survived, but the drink that defined it did not. Number 19. Chiles and nogada. This was not an everyday dish. This was the dish that said your family had money, patience, and pride. Poblano chiles roasted, peeled, and stuffed with a picadillo of ground pork, candied fruits, raisins, almonds, peaches, pears, and apples. Topped with a walnut cream sauce from fresh walnuts, soaked and peeled one by one. Finished with pomegranate seeds and parsley, green, white, and red. The colors of the Mexican flag. The dish was born in Puebla, possibly in the kitchens of Augustinian nuns in 1821, to celebrate independence. It appeared at every September fiesta through the 1970s. But the preparation took an entire day. Every ingredient had to be peeled, chopped, fried, or soaked separately. In the United States, the walnuts were the wrong variety. The fruits were the wrong season. By the mid-1980s, the dish vanished from Mexican-American fiesta tables. It was too much work for a generation that had stopped peeling walnuts by hand. The recipe did not survive on paper. It survived in hands. And when those hands stopped, the dish became a photograph on a wall. Number 18. Mixiotes de carnero. Lamb seasoned with a paste of dried chiles, garlic, cumin, and herbs, wrapped in the thin translucent membrane peeled from a maguey leaf, tied into individual packets with string. Steamed for hours in a large pot until the meat melted and the chili paste became a concentrated sauce inside. Opening a mixiote at your table was an event. The steam hit your face with the smell of chilies and slow-cooked lamb. In the states of Hidalgo, Tlaxcala, and Puebla, mixiotes were the standard fiesta dish for weddings and Saints' Day celebrations. Each guest received their own packet. The maguey membrane was the secret. It sealed in moisture and flavor the way no foil or parchment could. When the Mexican government restricted the harvesting of maguey membranes in the 1980s to protect the plants, cooks switched to parchment paper or banana leaves. It was not the same. The dish survived in name but lost its soul. Number 17. Manchamanteles. The name means tablecloth stainer. That tells you everything. This was a mole from Puebla, made with ancho chiles, tomatoes, cinnamon, cloves, and black pepper. But what set it apart was the fruit. Pineapple chunks, plantain slices, and sometimes jicama, all simmered in the chili sauce with pork or chicken. The sweetness of the fruit against the heat of the chilies created something that tasted like no other mole in Mexico. It stained everything it touched. Tablecloths, shirts, fingers. Nobody cared. At fiestas in Puebla and Oaxaca through the 1970s, Manchamanteles was served in enormous clay cazuelas set in the center of the table. You served yourself with a ladle. The dish was messy, generous, and alive. By the 1990s, it had nearly vanished from fiesta tables. Younger cooks did not know how to balance the fruit and the chiles. They made mole poblano instead, which was simpler and more forgiving. Manchamanteles required instinct. You had to taste and adjust as you cooked. There was no recipe that captured it. Only a grandmother standing over a cazuela, adding a pinch of this, a handful of that, tasting from a wooden spoon and nodding when it was right. Number 16, Capirotada de Fiesta. Mexican bread pudding, but not the kind you find in a bakery. Bolillo bread, toasted until hard. Layered in a clay pot with piloncillo syrup, cinnamon, cloves, peanuts, raisins, coconut, banana, and thick rounds of queso fresco. Each layer got a pour of the dark, warm syrup. The whole thing baked until the bread dissolved and the cheese melted into strings. During Lent and at Easter fiestas, this was the dessert everyone fought over. Every family had a different version. Some added tomato, some added butter. The piloncillo syrup was the constant. It tasted like caramel and smoke. In the 1960s, a tray cost less than $2 and fed 20 people. By the late 1980s, the dish had faded from fiesta tables in the United States. American-born generations found the combination of cheese and sweetbread pudding confusing. They did not understand it. They replaced it with store-bought cake. Number 15, Birria de chivo, goat birria, not beef. The original from Jalisco. A whole goat marinated overnight in a paste of dried chiles guajillo, ancho, and arbol, mixed with vinegar, garlic, cumin, oregano, cloves, and black pepper. The meat went into a clay pot, sealed with masa dough around the lid to trap every drop of steam. Cooked for 8 hours over a low fire until the meat shredded with a look. The consomme at the bottom of the pot was liquid gold, red, and fragrant. At weddings in Guadalajara through the 1970s, Birria de chivo was the main course. Period. The goat had to be young, tender, and freshly butchered. By the 1990s, goat became expensive and hard to source in the United States. Beef birria replaced it. The flavor was different, richer, heavier, less clean. The goat birria that your abuela knew, the one sealed in clay with masa, cooked over wood, was a dish from another century. Now here is the thing about Birria de chivo. The clay pot mattered as much as the goat. Those pots were carried across the border by women who packed them the same way you would pack a child, wrapped in blankets, wedged between suitcases. A clay pot from Jalisco could last 3 generations if you treated it right. Each batch of birria seasoned the clay a little more. By the 10th wedding, the pot itself held flavor. You could boil plain water in it and taste the ghost of every fiesta it had witnessed. When families switched to aluminum and steel, the birria tasted thinner. Not worse, just less. The memory of previous meals was gone. And that is what most people do not understand about the food that disappeared. It was not just the recipes, it was the vessels, the tools, the surfaces that held generations of cooking. A molcachette passed down from your great-grandmother ground differently than one bought at a store. A comal blackened by 40 years of tortillas released a flavor that no new comal could match. The Birria de chivo vanished, and with it went the clay pots, the wood fires, and the 3-day weddings that gave the dish its meaning. Number 14, Tamales de ceniza, ash tamales. The name scared people away, but the flavor was incredible. Corn kernels soaked in water mixed with wood ash instead of commercial cal. The ash nixtamalization produced a softer, more fragrant mesa with a blue-gray color and a mineral taste that regular mesa could not match. These tamales were made for Dia de los Muertos and for the feast days of local saints in Oaxaca and Guerrero. The filling was simple, black beans or mole or nothing at all. The masa itself was the star, wrapped in corn husks, steamed in tall pots. The ash had to come from specific hardwoods: oak, mesquite, or encino. The wrong ash ruined the flavor. By the 1980s, commercial nixtamal replaced the ash process almost everywhere. The tamales de ceniza survived only in remote villages. In the United States, they were already a memory. Number 13, Pulque curado. Before beer took over Mexican fiestas, there was pulque, the fermented sap of the maguey plant, thick and slightly sour with the texture of thin yogurt. At celebrations in central Mexico through the 1960s, pulque curado was the drink. Curado meant flavored: oat pulque, guava pulque, celery pulque, pine nut pulque. The combinations were endless. Pulquerias in Mexico City served dozens of flavors. At fiestas in the countryside, a barrel of fresh pulque sat on a table with a ladle, and guests served themselves. The drink was ancient. The Aztecs called it octli and reserved it for priests, warriors, and the elderly. It could not be bottled or preserved. It had to be consumed within days of fermentation. That was its beauty and its death sentence. When the beer companies arrived in the 1940s, they marketed beer as modern and hygienic. Pulque was painted as dirty, primitive, backward. By the 1980s, an entire generation of Mexican Americans had never tasted it. A drink that had been sacred for 1,000 years was replaced by a bottle with a lime in it. Number 12, Mole Amarillo de Oaxaca. Yellow mole. Not as famous as mole negro or mole poblano, but in Oaxacan households, this was the mole you made for a fiesta when you wanted to feed 100 people without going broke. Chilcostli and Costeño Amarillo chiles gave it a bright golden color and a gentle heat. Hierba Santa, Hoja Santa, and epazote provided an herbal backbone. The base was corn masa dissolved in broth, which thickened the sauce and gave it body. Chicken, pork, or chayote squash went into the pot, served with handmade tortillas and black beans. A pot of mole amarillo for 50 guests cost about $8 in 1970. It was the working family's fiesta mole, generous and cheap. But the specific chilies were regional, hard to find outside Oaxaca. When Oaxacan families immigrated to Los Angeles and Chicago in the 1980s and 1990s, they could not find chilcostal peppers. The mole amarillo became impossible to make correctly. Some substituted guajito chiles. It was not the same. The dish faded quietly in diaspora kitchens. Number 11, pan de polvo, polvorones, dust cookies. The name described the texture, so delicate they crumbled into powder the moment you bit into them. Flour, lard, cinnamon, anise, and sugar. That was the whole recipe. Mixed by hand, rolled into small rounds, baked until barely golden, dusted with cinnamon sugar while still warm. At every quinceañera, wedding, and baptism in South Texas and northern Mexico, trays of pan de polvo sat on a dessert table alongside tres leches cake and flan. The lard was essential. It gave the cookies their impossible tenderness. Butter would not do it. Shortening would not do it. Only lard, rendered at home from pork fat bought at the carniceria, produced the right crumble. When health trends in the 1980s turned against lard, home bakers switched to vegetable shortening. The cookies lost their texture. They held together instead of dissolving. They tasted clean instead of rich. The pan de polvo made with real lard, mixed by a grandmother who knew exactly how long to work the dough, existed in a narrow window of time. The health warnings erased the lard. The grandmothers passed, and a cookie that had been at every celebration for 100 years became a denser, blander version of itself sold in plastic trays at Mexican bakeries. Here is what nobody talks about. Pan de polvo was never just a cookie at a fiesta. It was the first thing a bride offered her new family. The mother of the bride spent weeks making hundreds of them, each one identical. Each one proof that her daughter came from a household where the women knew how to cook. Crumbly and light meant skill and patience. Dense and dry meant something had gone wrong. Everyone at the wedding knew the difference. Nobody said it out loud. But the trays of pan de polvo were inspected as carefully as the bride's dress. When bakeries took over and families stopped making them at home, that silent conversation ended. The cookies became decoration. They stopped being a message. Number 10. Cochinita pibil de fiesta. The real cochinita pibil was not made in an oven. It was made in a pit. A pib dug in the ground, lined with stones, heated by a fire that burned for hours until the stones were white-hot. A whole pig, rubbed with achiote paste and sour orange juice wrapped in banana leaves, lowered into the pit. Covered with more leaves, then earth. Left for 12 hours. The banana leaves steamed the meat while the underground heat slow-roasted it from every direction. The result was pork, so tender it dissolved, bright orange from the achiote, tangy from the citrus. In the Yucatan, every village celebration from baptism to patron saint's day centered on this dish. A single pig fed 200 people. The pit cooking was communal. Your whole neighborhood helped dig, build the fire, and lower the pig. By the 1980s, urban families in Merida had stopped digging pits. The cochinita moved to Dutch ovens and slow cookers. It was still good. But the smokiness from the earth, the faint mineral taste from the hot stones, the way the banana leaves charred at the edges and perfumed the meat, that was lost. Number 9. Pozole Rojo de Jalisco, red pozole, the fiesta version, not the Thursday night dinner pozole, the one made in a pot the size of a bathtub for 100 guests at a wedding or a patron saint's feast. Pork shoulder and pork head simmered for hours with dried hominy corn until the kernels bloomed open like flowers. The broth turned red from a puree of ancho and guajillo chiles, garnished with shredded cabbage, sliced radish, dried oregano, chopped onion, and lime. A bowl of pozole rojo at a fiesta in Guadalajara in 1972 cost nothing. It was free. The host family provided it as a gift to their guests. Making pozole for 100 people required starting with 20 pounds of dried corn and 10 pounds of pork. The corn had to be nixtamalized by hand, boiled with cal until the skin slipped off. That process alone took a full day. When canned hominy became available in the 1980s, the fiesta pozole changed. It was faster, easier, and emptier. The handmade hominy had a chew and a corn sweetness that the canned version could not match. Number 8. Torrejas en miel de piloncillo. Slices of bolillo dipped in beaten egg, fried until golden, then submerged in a hot syrup made from piloncillo, cinnamon sticks, cloves, and orange peel. The bread soaked up the dark syrup until it became heavy and sweet. Served warm during Lent, at Easter fiestas, and at Christmas posadas. In the 1960s, every abuela in Mexico had a recipe for torrejas. They were cheap. A dozen cost about 50 cents to make. The piloncillo syrup was the same one used for Champurrado, buñuelos, and Capirotada. It was the sweetener that defined Mexican fiesta desserts. When refined white sugar and corn syrup became cheaper in the 1980s, piloncillo fell out of use in Mexican-American kitchens. The torrejas needed the smoky, molasses-like depth of piloncillo to taste right. White sugar made them taste like French toast. The dish did not die all at once. It faded generation by generation until it existed only in the memories of people who had eaten it as children. Number 7. Clemole de Puebla. A brothy, rustic stew from Puebla that sat somewhere between a mole and a soup. Dried chiles ancho and guajillo, tomatoes, and masa dissolved in broth to create a thick, earthy liquid. Pork ribs, green beans, chayote, and corn on the cob went into the pot. The masa gave it body. The chilies gave it warmth. The vegetables made it a complete meal in a single bowl. At fiestas in the Sierra Norte of Puebla, clemole was the dish the women made when they needed to feed everyone and there was not enough meat to go around. The vegetables stretched the pot. The masa thickened the broth so every bowl felt substantial. It was clever, humble, and beautiful food. A pot of clemole for 30 people cost less than $5 in 1975. By the 1990s, clemole had nearly disappeared, even in Puebla. Younger cooks did not learn it. Cookbooks ignored it. So here is what clemole really was. It was proof that a cook with almost nothing could still set a table that felt abundant. The women who made clemole did not apologize for the small amount of meat in the pot. They celebrated the broth. They celebrated the chayote that grew on a vine in the backyard. They celebrated the masa that their own hands had ground that morning. The dish was proof that a cook with skill could transform simple ingredients into something that felt generous. Every fiesta needs a dish like that. A dish that says, we do not have much, but what we have, we share. Clemole was that dish. It carried no prestige. It won no awards. It fed people. It made them feel welcomed at a table where the host could not afford birria or mole negro. And it did this quietly, without asking for credit, the way every abuela in every kitchen has always done it. Number 6, colaciones de piñata. The original piñata candy. Not the plastic-wrapped hard candy you find at a party supply store today. Real colaciones were handmade sugar-coated seeds and nuts. Anise seeds rolled in layer after layer of colored sugar until they became marble-sized balls, hard on the outside and fragrant inside. Peanuts coated in caramel and dusted with cinnamon. Dried fruits glazed in piloncillo. At posadas and birthday fiestas in the 1960s and 1970s, your piñata was filled with colaciones, tejocotes, sugar cane sticks, guavas, and oranges. When the piñata broke, children scrambled for real food. The colaciones were made by hand in small batches by candy makers in every neighborhood. A pound cost about 75 cents in 1970. By the 1980s, mass-produced candy replaced the handmade colaciones. The fruit disappeared from piñatas. Plastic toys replaced the oranges. A piñata went from being a vessel of real, handmade abundance to a bag of factory candy wrapped in plastic. Number 5, mole de olla de rancho. Ranch-style mole soup. Not a mole in the Puebla sense. A mole in the original Nahuatl sense, meaning sauce or mixture. Beef shank or short ribs simmered in a broth colored and flavored with ancho and guajillo chilies. Corn on the cob, chayote, green beans, zucchini, and epazote went into the pot. The zoconosal, a sour, prickly pear fruit, was the ingredient that made this version distinct from any other soup. It added a tartness that cut through the richness of the beef. In the 1960s and 1970s, mole de olla was the dish served at ranchos after a day of branding cattle, harvesting corn, or building a neighbor's house. It was celebration food for working people. Cheap and big-hearted, a pot-fed 50. The zoconosal was easy to find in Mexican markets, but in the United States, it was almost impossible to source. Without the zoconosal, the dish lost its balance. Cooks tried adding lime juice instead. It was not the same. The rancho version of mole de olla faded in diaspora kitchens by the late 1980s. Number 4, enchiladas de boda. Wedding enchiladas. Not the enchiladas you order at a restaurant. These were made with fresh corn tortillas dipped in a sauce of dried chilies, filled with shredded chicken or cheese, rolled tightly, and arranged in rows in a clay baking dish, topped with crumbled queso fresco, sliced onion, and a drizzle of crema. The sauce was the key. Each family had its own recipe, and the differences were subtle. A little more cumin here, a roasted tomato there. The enchiladas were made in batches of 100 or more for weddings, prepared by teams of women who worked together in a kitchen for an entire day. Your tortillas had to be handmade. They had to be thin, and they had to be dipped in the sauce at exactly the right moment, warm enough to be pliable, but not so soft that they fell apart. In the 1970s, wedding enchiladas were served alongside birria and rice at receptions in church halls across the Southwest. By the late 1980s, catered food replaced the handmade enchiladas. The tortillas came from a bag. The sauce came from a can. The women who used to spend a day making them together found other things to do. Number 3, tepache de piña, fermented pineapple drink, not pineapple juice. Tepache was alive. Pineapple rinds, piloncillo, cinnamon, and cloves fermented in a clay pot for 3 days until the liquid turned fizzy, tangy, and slightly alcoholic. It tasted like pineapple, but deeper, earthier. At fiestas through the 1970s, a clay olla of tepache sat on the drink table next to the agua fresca and the beer. It cost almost nothing to make. The pineapple rinds were trash otherwise. The clay pot was essential. It harbored wild yeast from previous batches, which meant every family's tepache tasted slightly different. A pot that had been making tepache for 10 years produced a more complex drink than a new one. When families switched to plastic buckets, the wild yeast colonies died. The tepache became flat. By the late 1980s, most Mexican-American families had stopped making it. Soda was cheaper. The clay pots ended up in garages, forgotten. Number 2, arroz con leche de olla, rice pudding made in a clay pot over a low fire. Not baked, not microwaved. Cooked slowly, stirred constantly for 2 hours. Rice, whole milk, cinnamon sticks, orange peel, vanilla, sugar, and condensed milk at the end. The clay pot held heat differently than metal. It distributed it gently, which prevented the milk from scorching. The result was a pudding so creamy it coated the back of a spoon. At every birthday party, quinceañera, and Christmas gathering through the 1970s, a pot of arroz con leche sat on the dessert table, spooned into small cups. A batch for 40 people cost less than $3 in 1975. When plastic and aluminum replaced clay in your kitchen, the arroz con leche changed. It scorched more easily. The gentle heat of the clay was irreplaceable. Grandmothers who had stirred the pot for hours did not pass the habit to their daughters, who had jobs in commutes and microwave ovens. Number 1. Ponche navideño de frutas, Christmas punch, made from scratch in a pot the size of a small child on Nochebuena. Tejocotes, guavas, sugarcane sticks, apples, pears, prunes, cinnamon, piloncillo, and hibiscus flowers. The fruits simmered until the kitchen smelled like Christmas itself. The tejocotes were the soul of the punch. Small, hard, sour crab apples that softened in the hot liquid and burst with tart sweetness when you bit into them. You ate the fruit from the bottom of your cup with a spoon. At posadas from December 16th through Christmas Eve, every household served ponche. Walking through East LA or Pilsen in December 1974, you could smell it through the doors. The ponche was always free. A cup was how you told a stranger they were welcome. When Mexican grocery stores consolidated and seasons stopped mattering, the fruits became harder to find. Families substituted canned fruit cocktail. The ponche went from a labor of love to a shortcut that tasted nothing like the original. The neighborhoods still have posadas. The singing still happens. But the cup in your hand is different now. Lighter, sweeter, missing the tejocotes, missing the smell that used to pull you toward a stranger's door on a cold December night. Make one of these dishes this week, just one. Try the Capirotada with real piloncillo. Try the Champurrado with fresh masa from a tortilleria. Try the arroz con leche in a clay pot, stirred by hand, the way it was done. You do not need a fiesta. You do not need 200 guests. You just need a kitchen and the decision to do it the old way, once. Set a place. Eat it slow. Tell me in the comments which dish your family used to make. Tell me if the birria de chivo beats the asado de boda. Tell me if anyone still makes ponche with real tejocotes. Tell me if your grandmother's tamales were wrapped in corn husks or banana leaves, because Doña Carmen did not cook for 3 days in Boyle Heights because she had to. She cooked because that table, covered in a white cloth in the backyard with 200 chairs borrowed from the church, was the only place where the old country and the new one touched. These were not forgotten dishes. They were abandoned ones. And every one of them is proof that the simplest food, made by hand, shared at a table, can still be an act of love.